You're listening to Your Rivers Are Wrong, the podcast. My name is Merle, I'm here with my good friend Dante, and we're here to build worlds and tell their stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hey, hello, welcome back to the third episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong podcast. My name is Dante. I'm one of the co-hosts of this show.
And I'm the other co-host, in case you were wondering, and my name is Merle. And we're still doing it, Dante. I'm very proud of us.
Totally nailed that. Yeah. Hello to everyone who is tuning in for the first time. This is an ongoing experience that we're still trying to iron out as I'm working my way through this intro. How are you doing? How is the new year for you?
Pretty. It feels very the same because my holiday is still just going. But it was really nice. I don't know. I always feel like the sort of ultimate, what's the word? Like anti-climax in the new year, because then the sort of most boring months happen, for me at least, like January until like February, March. That stuff is... Usually I feel like those are the most boring months because then all the partying is gone and the sort of coziness of Christmas and everything and darkness. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like, we've spent too much holiday cheer in December. We need to recharge for a bit.
Exactly. Which is always why I feel so bad for people, or I mean they're fine, but I always feel so bad for people when they have their like birthday or something in December. Because then you have like the ultimate party month and then the rest of the year is just meh.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a couple of relatives who are born at the top of December. So we celebrate top of December, celebrate Christmas, celebrate New Year's. It's just a never ending celebration for the month. And then January, nobody. Yep. Nobody at all.
Gotta work again. Everything's back to boring normal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How was your celebration of New Year?
Oh, the usual, hang out with family. They all come over and we all try to stay up till midnight playing. This year it was bingo. The big thing was bingo. We had a whole wheel. We had a bunch of really special cards that didn't require the stones. You just flipped something up and down.
Oh, wow.
Whenever a number was
This
called.
sounds like a complicated bingo.
Well, it was new for us. So we played it for like 4 hours.
Amazing. I mean, you have the time. I mean, this is when you got to do it.
Yeah.
And you have a big family, right?
Yeah, pretty big.
Nice.
Well, not. Some people have like super big families, like 40, 50, but my family's like a strong 15 people.
Oh, so. I mean, that's solid. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. All right.
Love that.
Let's jump into the topics for today. As always, or as of last episode, both of us bring a topic to the table regarding world building, whether it be a trope, an idea, a thematic that we're going to kind of break down. But we don't know what each other is bringing, so it's a little bit of a surprise for both of us. I believe I'm kicking it off today. Is that right?
Yes, go for it. I'm very curious.
All right. So we did mention it just a little bit in the last episode, but today, for my topic, I wanted to talk about the thematic of academia or academy. I did have a couple of lead-up questions for this, but in the topic of it, it seems to persist throughout the years, the general appeal of academia, whether it be the new setting for D&D, Strixhaven, which is a university setting. There's the Harry Potter reunion recently came out, celebrating 20 years. Let me see what else. There was also the revival or reboot of Vampire Academy, which is also something that was kind of old and I guess deserves a second chance. So my question for today, or my topics for today, is what is the appeal of academia as a fictional thematic? What makes world building for a school-based setting different? And what are your favorite examples? And why are they your favorite?
Such a good lineup, man.
Yeah.
I mean, to kick things off, I love that academia is now sort of a thing again. Because I remember the first sort of... not to be all sentimental here, but I'm gonna be for a second. My mom used to have like these sort of how do you call that? Like pocket books, like a series of 6 pocket books for like teen girls in like the 70s. So these are so old, and they're still in my bookcase because I loved them too very much when I was younger. No, when I mean still, I still love them. And it was just sort of a super casual, your average British boarding school story. And every issue was like 1 year of boarding school. And she made friends, and they had like a hockey competition, or no, what was it? Like a lacrosse competition, which I didn't know at all what it was. And they had like drama, and they had like this sort of how do you say that? Like beautifying of school life, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There was this one
like the
scene.
romanticism of it.
Yeah, for sure. Which I'm totally down for, because I love that stuff. But I remember this one scene in the first book, kind of like the Harry Potter one, where they would drive up to the school, and the school was called Mallory Towers. And you would see the 4 towers like off the hills, and she was like, "Oh, I'm finally getting there." And this is always what reminds me, or what I'm reminded of when I think of academia. And then of course there's the more, the bigger examples like Harry Potter and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I mean, a pretty important example, I feel, because I think maybe that book is also really sort of made it a thing, if you know what I mean.
Do you think that? Yeah,
I guess the aesthetic was there, but I think it really got super widespread after that. Aside from all the magic, even like just a sort of boarding school, growing up together, coming of age school environment.
Mm-hmm. I think certainly academia was a genre or trope before Harry Potter, but after Harry Potter, people were like, "Wait, this is an untapped well.
Yeah,
let's explore this further."
Yeah,
and yeah, I love the fact that you brought up the kind of beautification of school and the just exploring that moment that you mentioned right at the start, where you walk up to the school and you're met with this imposing building.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's terrifying, but the main character doesn't quite know what's inside yet. And there's like a fear and apprehension and anxiety towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like a sense of wonder the first time they arrive. And then it just slowly unravels into something that becomes more and more familiar. Also, what you mentioned, the fact that there's 4 books pertaining to the 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there is just a wonderful progression to that is kind of like expected and anticipated, because the first year, obviously, you have your classmates, your year mates, and then you have your upperclassmen who kind of either are really mean or they teach you the ropes. And regardless of your experience with them, and the reader knows by the end of the book, they'll be graduating, they'll be leaving, and there's kind of a nostalgic feeling, kind of bittersweet about it.
And I think it also taps into the sort of fact that everyone has been to school in general. Well, you know what I mean? Not everyone, but like a lot of readers that read these types of books probably went to school in some kind of capacity, which is sort of, in that case, quite a universal experience. So there's something nostalgic already about reading about schools or school environments. And then I think also what's super important or relevant is the fact that you're really entering a bubble, because specifically boarding school. So when you sleep at school also, I don't know if this is like a bigger thing outside of what I'm used to, but normally here we just have schools that you go back and forth and you just have your own home, where you go back to every evening. But boarding school specifically, really, you only visit your family or go back home like in a few holidays, and then that's it. And the rest of the time, you're just completely immersed in whatever school life is like. And it comes with, evening hours, and it comes with walking around the perimeter, and it comes with friendships or with, sort of surrogate family bonds, I would almost say, because it's really sort of the ultimate sibling, because you have so many, or sibling relationship, I should say, because you have so many peers, people from the same age around all the time, and you're doing the same stuff every day. And it's really, I think, as a storyteller or as a world builder, to link it back a little bit, I think the most important or interesting also craft about sort of boarding school or academia style stories is this sort of crafting of that bubble, and what that means to be in there all the time, and how the perimeter looks and how that influences people, and et cetera, et cetera.
Especially like, because we would talk about like world building and what kind of world is built in school-based settings. Well, the school itself is usually kind of a microcosm of the world at large, right? It's an example. Like you learn more about the world based on what the classes are like, what the teachers are like, what kind of people you're running into, like their backgrounds. And without having to flesh out the entirety of the country or continent around it, you kind of get little glimpses of it. You kind of look little things, little quirks about people, you know? And there is, as you touched upon, there's kind of the feeling of a found family in schools, like you working out who you're friends with, who you're not, how that dynamic changes over the years, whether it be like a deep friendship, a rivalry, a romance, things like that are just the little intricacies. It's
and also
there's
a lot of first times in there because school environments are so much about coming of age and about sort of the teenage life, you know, or the young adult life, whatever you want to call it. So there's all this sort of, I don't know. I think school environments are so linked to sort of people coming into their own. So whenever even if a school environment in a book, for example, is something that is not where you spend the most of your time, you still have this sort of, automatic response almost to it, where you feel sort of the nostalgia of teenage life dripping through whenever you walk through halls like that, you know?
Absolutely,
which I think is super interesting and fun.
Yeah, like basically when the Harry Potter movies were coming out, I was just around the same age. Like my siblings and I were just around the same age, give or take a couple of years, of the characters in the series, because somehow they released 8 movies in 10 years, which is like a feat of its own. You know? Kind of keeping up with the age group that was watching it. And I distinctly remember, and it was mentioned in the interview documentary thing that came out like a week ago. The first 3 books were kind of exploring the wonderment of kind of children growing up in a magical world. And then in book 4, there was a major tonal shift that was like, this is serious. It's time to grow up, you know?
Yeah.
And that transition into the whimsy and the wonder suddenly becoming very serious and dark. And just that whole experience was kind of like very similar to mirroring real life, when after you like hit the stride of like high school, it's time to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life, and you kind of have to wrestle with that. So having this sort of fantastical world that was still very relatable and very like I think the 4th book in particular like really hammers in the adolescent experience of expectations, of romances, of these friendships that are quickly changing.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
And then it perfectly fits because the characters are like, well, what is it? 15, 14 at that point? So it's perfectly 14-ish. Exactly what you're saying. Like the tone changes, and also the inner world of the characters naturally changes, because that's how it works. How a lot of people change around that age, you know? It's so interesting. And I think specifically what you were talking about, the sort of relatableness of the magic world also is, I think, so important to the success also of Harry Potter. Of course, it's about the magic and the wonder, but it's also because it is so rooted in sort of real feelings or real experiences or real wonder, even though that is wonder about imaginary things like magic. It really works, and it feels like a sort of solid thing that you're stepping into. Like it also, again, like it feels like a bubble you're stepping into, even if you're watching a movie. Even if you're not the main character, you're really sort of sucked in.
Yeah, I think, and of course, on the topic of the podcast and of world building at large, the world of Harry Potter, although it is kind of clowned on sometimes, that if you really look at it with like with a magnifying glass, you start finding things that don't make sense.
Of course,
like Magic and Misfits really hammers that home.
What's that?
Oh, to people who aren't watching, it's basically a tabletop RPG set in a world very similar or modeled around the Harry Potter world, and under the scrutiny of grown adults playing through the game, you start to realize things don't really make sense, like being subjecting young children to the pressures of class selection at a very young age, and putting them in front of very, very dangerous things. But besides that, truly the testament to just J.K. Rowling as an author is the fact that this whimsical, magical world still persists even after the books are done. People love the Harry Potter universe.
Yep, exactly.
And it just continues to inspire and grow people's imagination into the kind of premier wizarding setting. And it's just a beautiful example of world building and how that can really tap into people's like curiosity and imagination.
Yeah. And I think something else that's also worth noting is the sort of sense of belonging that's really there. You know, you have, because also academia or dark academia, maybe more specifically, really has a certain aesthetic, you know, like there's of course the sort of world building and the bubble and the sort of story based things we're talking about now, but of course also just the fact that you have to wear like British school uniforms, or the Harry Potter have like these robes, you know, or you have the symbol of each house, you know, pinned on your rope or something. There's really a sort of
like an identity sort of,
I guess, yeah, there's
slowly
that's really part of it also, I feel, and really part of the appeal also, because I think if a boarding school really is a sort of home for you, which of course it is because you spend so much time there, it really becomes also almost a nationality, I would say, to be a bit broad about it. But you really sort of start to feel a sense of pride. And then they have these sport competitions where there's like,
of course,
we want to fight for our own, like, any kind of sport, whatever, you know, sports anime also does this. Yeah.
Sports nobody understands, like lacrosse.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. I think it took me like 4 books before I realized that it was a sort of hockey / no, I still don't know it, honestly. I'm trying to explain it. I'm like, no, I know that it works with like a net and then a ball and then you throw stuff, like, and that's all I got.
Yeah, if someone could explain lacrosse to us, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a mix of like
we can do it in the errata
rugby,
of the
something
next,
along those lines.
The next episode, yeah, for sure.
Chuck it in the errata.
But you know, the main character was really passionate about it, so you know, I was super convinced about lacrosse for like 4 books. So even though I didn't know at all what it was, so that's hard to do, I think. Also, if you have no idea what you're talking about.
I was a really big lacrosse fan, but I have no idea how to play this.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Yeah, and to kind of actually, I wanted to ask you, do you have, because you mentioned it in the last podcast, do you have any examples of dark academia settings that you're reading into now, or is it?
Well, there's a few. If we're still in the magic part of world building,
sure.
There's of course the Grishaverse, which is a series of books written by Leigh Bardugo. And I think officially it's a young adult book, but I'm still really enjoying it. And recently there also came a Netflix series about it. And it's sort of set in a Russian style universe or world. And then the magic is sort of part of that. And some people have that magic innately. I'm trying to remember how this goes exactly because it's been a while.
No, it's okay.
But I think there was like elemental magic and there was sort of corporeal magic, and they all had like super cool names and specific robes and stuff like that. But also the plot was really good and it felt like a really, really livable space that you were into, you know?
Yeah.
So that one's a really good one, also because it has a very strange sort of Russian aesthetic, unlike the sort of usual British vibe boarding school things that you see, or, you know, Japanese kind of school aesthetics, which is of course super big in manga and stuff like that. Oh, there's also Little Witch Academia, which is a manga that is basically Harry Potter, but it's so fun and quirky. Yes. I love it. You should all watch that one too. I should rewatch it actually. There's too much things to watch. So I also watched the movie Morris, which is a sort of dark academia. And then there's a really cool, beautiful gay romance in there with like a young Hugh Grant. And they all wear like Edwardian style stuff, and it's really good. I don't know. Sometimes I just watch movies for costumes in case you didn't realize. Sometimes aesthetics is enough. Yeah. But then there's also like a young Hugh Grant in there, and the plot's quite good. So you should watch that too.
Yeah, shout outs to Hugh Grant. Yeah, if he's listening to this podcast, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. What else? Yeah, there's so much stuff. Oh, and maybe the most important thing, because this is how I sort of got obsessed with it again lately. There's like a bunch of YouTubers now that make these playlists, and they're called like Mr. Darcy just proposed to you in the rain. an Emma playlist or something.
Yes,
or I don't even know if that's Emma, but like, yeah.
The very super specific titles.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You
or
were
like
just, you're working on your homework with your high school crush.
Yeah, for sure. But then specifically, there's a lot of them that have like all sort of kind of classical waltzes in there, and they're called like POV. You're dancing with the villain.
Yes, exactly. I think I've watched that exact one.
Vibe, and it's great. I did not plan on being obsessed with these playlists, but here I am. I'm doing it. I'm part of the community now, and I'm listening to so much of this stuff, and it's really good. And because of the music, you really get sort of back into the vibe of, Russian waltzes or like big ballrooms with gowns and everything, and it's very good. And I love it.
Yeah, truly a time to be alive when you can just look up like classical playlists and find yourself whisked into a magical place.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Do you have your favorites?
I mean, I'm pretty basic with mine. I obviously grew up on Harry Potter. I think now I just vaguely remember in the distant parts of my memory that I had like a Vampire Academy phase where I like read a whole lot of specifically like vampires in a school setting, which was such a strange. It was like right after the dragon phase, but before the urban supernatural phase. Right.
I'm so happy that you can make like an entire timeline about obsessions related to like magic world building and academia.
Oh yeah,
amazing.
But it's really just the twist of it, and enjoying seeing like a fantasy characters in a very relatable setting.
Right. Yeah.
I guess to kind of cap off this topic and then move on to yours. One of my favorite things about academia thematics and world building is that the reader knows that this story is finite. By when the character graduates, 9 times out of 10 the story is over. So it's a matter of how much happens in that window, how the cast characters changes within that time, and eventually reflecting on the journey as a whole with a determined ending is just, I don't know, just one of those really nostalgic feelings to kind of look back on. And it very much mirrors real life, that you're transitioning into a new phase and you kind of have to say goodbye to a lot of things you're comfortable with. That whole idea and energy on the last few chapters, it always just pulls at me, Easily one of my favorite thematics in terms of writing and storytelling. And I'm just a big fan of it.
Are you planning on using the Strixhaven stuff to write one of your own?
Dude, I bought the book, and people are saying like, oh, it's not enough. It's not enough to tell a full story. And I'm just like, guys, you don't know the potential.
Because this help me out here for a sec. Strixhaven is like new published content for the Dungeons and Dragons world, right?
Yes. As always, we have to bring up D&D at least once. Strixhaven is a setting pulled from the Magic the Gathering card game, where you kind of join, people come from different worlds, different realms, to a singular school to learn more about magic. It's very much magic kids go to high school, and it taps into like the rivalries and the different aesthetics of magic. And yeah, I mean, some people aren't very excited about that because like, oh, it's not my swords and dungeons sort of like little adventure, but there's so much untapped potential. It's just,
what's your favorite part of it?
You can feel it.
Because I haven't read it. Like sell me on this.
Yeah, I haven't read the adventure in full, kind of because I wanted to play it, but it's totally fine.
Or what are you more excited about?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most excited about is just kind of the daily life, actually. I really enjoy not necessarily the big adventures or trials of the setting, but rather what people do on their off time, what kind of defines the character in terms of like side jobs, trying to earn some money, or like their favorite classes or extracurriculars, things that you don't really talk about. The downtime aspect of D&D is very much on
the sort of slice of life.
Yes, exactly.
Part of it? Okay.
Yeah. With you don't.
Yeah, I love that.
Not about like the attack rolls and the damage and all that. Just really the sit down and let's learn about what character you're playing. Very excited. I don't want to go too much of a tangent on that because I'm curious about what topic you brought to the table.
Yeah. Well, actually, if we're gonna switch to mine, I think it taps quite into what we were talking about in terms of a school environment being a sort of bubble that you sort of immerse yourself into, Because I was thinking about the idea of sort of creating a story or world that all takes place in one confined space. So I was thinking about more like classic stuff. For example, the Lord of the Flies books, where a bunch of, I think, high schoolers or at least kids get trapped on a deserted island or something, and they have to sort of make it work with themselves and with finding food and with, like, you know, not killing each other in frustration. And there's also a movie by Louis Buñuel, I think, if I say that correctly, called The Exterminating Angel from forever ago, like 70s or something. And then in there, the characters are all having like a dinner party, and at some point they want to go and they're done with their night and they can't leave the room. And then the movie starts. And then, you know, the whole sort of sequence of what makes people still people, and they go like super crazy at the end, and it's really like they're turning into monsters almost. Like,
yeah,
they lose all of their social grace and sort of the structure of like basic life. And I think that's really interesting because one can find space, whether it is like a more complicated one, like a school, or literally just a dining room or an island, you know, it can really sort of influence the way that characters treat each other or that they interact with the world too. And I'm curious if you thought about this, or if you, I don't know. I just want to start the discussion because I think it's a super interesting sort of form of storytelling in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Lord of the Flies had like, I think it was like 10-year-olds were the main characters, like 8 to 10-year-olds.
Oh yeah, a bit younger. That's right.
And yeah, it's kind of like a reverse take of world building, because instead of slowly introducing your world to the reader or the watcher, you're kind of constrained to exactly what's around you, and suddenly the details become very, very fine and minute. Like, because there's so little to work with for the characters, everything becomes super like hyper examined. Like the details of like the trees or the woodwork of the table suddenly is very much important into the schematics of the story. And it kind of puts the characters, like, if you can't examine the world, then you can only examine what's in the room or what's in the setting, which are the characters. And just pulling them apart piece by piece and figuring out what makes them tick does speak more about the world, but also what makes them all uniquely different and integral to the story. I think it's personally very difficult because as like a novice writer or somebody who's just learning, it's very easy to just kind of start building stuff and making stuff and kind of fleshing out the world. But when you only have like so much space to work with, suddenly you're pressed for details. You're pressed for just the intricacies and nuances of your story, and you have to work with every single piece.
Yeah, for sure.
To kind of flesh out the story that you're trying to tell. Do you have like something particular that really sticks out to you about this? Or like,
I love that you called it like a sort of reverse world building, because I think it can really go both ways. Like, on the one hand, you have the sort of, to just name a few other things too, like the 12 Angry Men movie. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's basically an entire movie with 12 men that are part of, I think, the American sort of trials, like judges in an American trial.
Okay.
And the entire movie just takes place in the discussion of whether the man that was on trial is guilty or not. And that's the entire movie. So the whole room.
So like a jury, basically.
Yeah, a jury. Yeah. You would probably know the right terms for this, because I have no idea how American like law works. But
I'm not gonna ask. Do you guys have juries in Holland?
No. I mean, we have. Oh God, I don't know all the.
This is new to me.
No. That's, you don't have like a public sort of people that can influence the thing, because.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, I don't know shit about law, so why should I
and
be
neither
there?
do I.
So I find it an interesting system to say. But anyway,
I hope we never read a story about a courtroom, because we'll just get all the details wrong.
Yeah. But 12 Angry Men is basically the jury of one of those trials, and they just go back and forth. So it's really about the men that are there, so the random people that just got thrown together to be the jury for that trial. But it's also about what the trial actually is saying, and how to sort of, it's also about logical thinking, and so it's really sort of dialogue based and character based. So the room is just one room, but it's not interesting at all. Like, there's zero time or interest in the movie in the actual room that they're in, so there's no world building. And then the complete other side of that, I think would be a movie like Snowpiercer, which is also very good.
On my list,
You should watch it.
I've been meaning to.
I won't spoil it too much, but the premise of it is basically the whole world is sort of frozen or something, or there was a big disaster, sci-fi vibe, you know? And there's one train left in which a lot of people are living that just goes around a track in the world, and the rest of the world is basically unlivable. And within this train, there's such a, despite being in a confined space, you know what I mean? There's such a hierarchy and class system that is present there, even though it just takes place in one confined space, which is like a few cars of the train, you know? And as the characters traverse through the train, all these differences in the quote unquote world, even though it's a confined space that is the world for them, sort of start to surface, and they can see the differences between each part of the train and stuff like that. So then the world becomes such a character or such a part of the story again.
Oh,
so you did touch on that before. Yeah. Broad if you would want to, while still having a confined space. Which I think is super interesting. Yeah. And it's also a really nice world building exercise, what you're saying, because I think it's really hard. I think I've tried it like once or something where I just put a bunch of characters in like a setting and they didn't know what was going on, but they just had this one big old factory that they had to live in or something. I forgot what the plot was. I don't know. I didn't finish it probably.
Yeah, you did mention, I think it was like the first episode of the setting being a character. Could you expand on that? Because you said it and I wanted to kind of grow on that topic, but I don't know if we had the time for it.
Right. I think we mentioned it in the pilot episode or in the first one. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just love the idea of it's just what you're saying. Like the setting or the world that you live in becomes sort of a thing that you interact with. And I'm calling that a character because it will have its own quirks, or you will have a relationship with that world. Like very literal too. Like when I step into a room, I can like it or I can dislike it. And I can feel sort of a vibe of a room, either by the people that are in it or by the, I don't know, the colors of the walls, you know, or the highness of the ceilings. You know, there's vibes to that. And because if you have a very interesting world, the things that are placed in there, kind of what I mentioned also in the previous one about the Zuko Alone episode, the things that are placed or the things that you can touch or feel or experience can really influence the character, and then that becomes sort of a dialogue. And then suddenly you have two characters interacting with each other in a way. And I think that idea is super interesting. Yeah. And if you have a very complicated world, like a big D&D setting, or things that have so much secrets in them, or things that you don't know anything about. For example, the Harry Potter universe. When Harry just comes into it, he's like, what the hell's going on? And all the others have to explain it, you know, like the standard trope of like, let me explain the world to you, hero.
Clueless main character.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
I think the world there becomes sort of a thing that you have to experience and get to know in a way, which is super human-like almost, or sort of, you're really sort of, starting to make a relationship with the world if you sort of start interacting with it. Which is also why it's very interesting if you purposefully, for instance, put a character completely out of it. Like Rapunzel in the tower, you know? Like she can see it, but there's nothing she can interact with. She knows it's there. Or the people in the train from the Snowpiercer. They know there's stuff out there, but they have no clue what it is or how to work with it because they never are able to go there or visit or, you know, experience it. And there's also a sort of difference there, or things that you can play with there, which I love and I want to really get better at. I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I love the idea of it so much.
Yeah, just I really like the what you brought up, kind of the personification of a setting, and that its unique little quirks and nuances are something you have to grow accustomed to, as if you're learning like, and you're meeting a new acquaintance and you're learning like specific details about them bit by bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember that I watched a very abridged version of a summary about a movie where similar to other settings you brought up, it's like just a singular room with like 20 people in a circle. something along the lines of the setting is set up very quickly. It's like you guys have all been abducted by aliens. Only one of you will survive. Every 15 minutes, you have to choose who dies. Yeah. And that's it. That's the whole setting. Like the room is entirely black. There's no explanation as to who the abductors are or where these people came from.
And it doesn't matter, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a breakdown of like human value. Like who is more valuable than the other person? Who should we save in these situations? Who sacrifices themselves first? Like, is it worth salvaging someone who's like sickly or towards the end of their life? And it's actually the absence of setting that sets that all up. Like you can't be distracted by buildings or workplaces or
that's a good
parks
way to
or anything
describe
like that.
it.
Yeah. Like entirely removing the world building aspect strips down the story into the evaluation of like human value. And I don't know how good that movie was, to be honest, because I watched a really quick version of it. But yeah, just something like that, just really tiny microcosms of the world, whether it be like academy, whether it be like schools or otherwise, is a really fun way to kind of break down what makes people so interesting.
And I think maybe to finalize some thoughts here is also the thing that you were saying previously, like the ending chapters of the boarding school story. I think that is so similar to the idea of leaving the island or leaving the room that the entire world takes place in, if you have a specific thing like that. There's one children's book that I love. It's in Dutch, unfortunately, but it's called Exodus by Julia something.
Shout out to Julia.
Yeah, sorry. But your book was great. But it's kind of similar, right? So it starts on an island that is completely flooded and there's nothing else around it. And then at some point at the end of the story, they have to go because they're literally being flooded. And they're like, well, the only way to go is out there, even though we have no idea what it is. And they just start to, get on boats and go in the ocean. And the idea that when you establish a setting as being a confined space or a bubble or a boarding school, which is one instance of it, and then when you decide to finally, near the end of the story or at some, logical point in the plot, leave that bubble, it's so much more impactful than if you wouldn't have that confined space to start in the first place.
Exactly.
And I think the feeling of it is so, well, either hopeful or, desperate, but it's such an intense feeling to leave a bubble that you're so comfortable in, And I think that's super powerful as a sort of storytelling device too.
Like at times it's terrifying and at times it's like cathartic to finally be removed from this very constrained space.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That is certainly, gosh, that is a topic. I think we could talk about that more at another point in time. As we do reach the end of our podcast, we do have a tiny exercise, a little prompt that we give each other. I think it's my turn this week. Is that right?
Yes, I think so too.
Yes. So I'm offering a prompt to you, a little sample of a thematic that you kind of have to build into a world or examine how it affects that world. So the prompt for you today, are you ready?
I'm very ready. Let's go.
Awesome. I think is a pretty straightforward one and one that people pondered on for generations.
Oh God.
How would the world change if people were born with wings?
Ooh. It feels almost like a classic one, even though I still have to think about it.
One of the greats.
We should make like a sort of canon list of the ultimate world building prompts. I think the most important thing would be that there's a third dimension that you can travel in. There's an up and down now that you don't have to, well, I mean, you have to work for it, but it's like walking, but then up and down, It's very reachable. So I think a lot of...
It's like walking, but up and down.
Exactly. Remember this, people. And if you wanted to world build, this is how you build flying. Yeah, into your setting. Anyway, I think the most interesting part of that is that also then your infrastructure will become not on a flat surface, but in the air. And I think that would mean that doors would not have to be on streets anymore. There's not You know what I
Ooh.
mean? Like you can literally enter a building anywhere if you have an opening. Would there even be a building like having stairs and stuff like that? You know, like not to be like super architectural about it, but I think the whole sort of vertical traveling that we do now, or, you know, airplanes, that's not a thing anymore, or ladders, you know, that's all sort of irrelevant. Then there's also the idea of sort of living remotely. Remotely very often means it's either high or that you can't really travel to. If you live on your own in a mountain somewhere, like if everyone has wings, that's not very remote anymore. It takes some time to get there, you know, but it's not sort of deep within the mountain because you can just get there. There's not a thing anymore. Yeah.
I think there is the question of, does flying exert energy? Because if it does, then there certainly still is like escalators and stuff for the lazy.
That's interesting. I love this as a character building exercise. Like, what if the most lazy people just never use it? Like, it's like the people that buy like scooters because they don't want to walk, even though they live.
I buy scooters for the aesthetic. I don't know about you.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that's a better reason than not wanting to walk, to be honest. Like, there's people that just want scooters, even though they have like, okay, let me get on a tangent here. But Holland is super big on cycling, right? I think we know this. So
I didn't know this.
Oh, well, we cycle everywhere because we're a flat country and we're super crowded, so everything's nearby, so you can cycle literally anywhere. So everyone has a bike, old people have bikes, young people have bikes, everyone cycles all the time. So if you buy a scooter here, it's usually not, it's more for like coolness or for people that don't want to put in the effort of cycling, like actually with your legs and stuff, you know what I mean?
Is that like a
I feel,
is that like a true stigma to scooters? Is it like a real thing? That like, or like motorized transport.
Well, I mean, you're still faster, you know. So if you need to travel like longer distances, or e-bikes are a thing now. We're getting on such a tangent, but yes. Oh my god, yes.
No, this is important. I need to know this. It's important for me.
I think if you need to travel like long distance stuff, of course, buy a scooter or whatever. But if you're if you live in the city and you need to go to school for 15 minutes, if you would use a bicycle, then you don't need a scooter. It's just aesthetic, or it's just that you're literally lazy. And I feel like because so many people cycle here, it feels not like a sport, or, you know, it doesn't feel like exercise because it's just like taking the bus, but then cycling.
Part of
life. Yeah, it's just traversing, you know? And then there's also the thing of like getting passed by a scooter. You know, if I cycle in the cycling lane and then a scooter passes me really quickly, I'm like, oh, you don't deserve this lane. I'm doing all the effort here. You know, this is a thing.
Get in the street with the cars, with the engine.
Yeah. Use your legs. God damn it.
That's so funny.
Anyway.
All right.
I love that you never have these problems.
No, I don't think about that at all. Like literally never.
Yeah. Wow. Look at that.
Like we have a pretty solid like public transit system, but if somebody has a scooter, more power to them. They're like unique. I think there's certainly a lot of cycling in Manhattan, but it's not like to the point that we stigmatize people who have like.
I mean, I'm not talking for everyone, but this is my perhaps my personal
You
irritation.
don't speak for the people of Holland? You're not their representative?
I wish I wasn't. that would be a bad job to have. Anyway.
All right.
I can imagine that people with wings that have like, that are super lazy or that are super spoiled, they never use them. Or it's like, this is too much effort. And then they just don't. And then they just walk.
Maybe. Is it like maybe a muscle that you have to work out, and like Olympians have like fantastic wings?
It depends on what kind of wings, you know. If you have like the sort of angel type wings like birds, you know, I feel like that's muscles and energy, and sort of that you get tired if you do it a long time. But if it's more like, there's all kinds of wings. If
like levitation.
Yeah, if it's like levitation, being fancy with levitation, maybe then it's a magic source or a sort of other kind of thing. Or it's just fancy shoes that were invented, and then now everyone can use levitation because these shoes are super hot and they can levitate you. It's not wings, but you know, the same principle then happens.
Could you imagine the advent of this world? Like, we've invented jet boots. You no longer have to use those pesky tired wings. Just use these special boots.
Oh, that's even more funny. Like, everyone has wings anyway, but then the cool kids just use the boots because they're like, I don't need these wings.
Back in my day, we didn't have jet boots.
I love that. Yes. That's great.
Yeah. I whenever I think about this, I clearly this is a frequent thing. Whenever I think about this, I think about like the exertion that it takes to fly, like police chases and stuff. Like it obviously goes into the sky when needed, but like, do the criminals get tired of flying at a certain point? Did they have to like take a rest, find a perch?
Well, the interesting
like
thing about if you have a third dimension that you can traverse, there's not a lot of things in that dimension except for clouds or whatever you put there. Like if you build a super tall skyscraper, then that's a thing there, you know? But in general, a lot of the objects or infrastructure again, or streets or trees, you know, anything like that is usually on the ground.
That's fair.
So there's a difference there in sort of whether you want to make it like a place or not, like a destination. Maybe it's just sort of extra space that makes traveling easier, and that's it. That's all it gives you. That can be a thing.
Maybe there's mechanically engineered like slipstreams that people like the wind travels in a certain direction.
Oh,
so you can just kind of hop in and glide.
Yeah.
Glide your way
it's
to
like
work.
the Finding Dory thing where they have to get through the Gulf Stream and then they have like a
the
shortcut.
turtles and all that.
Yeah. Love it. I wish to have wings so bad though. I think flying would be so fucking fun. I would love it much.
I hope they invent that in our lifetimes.
There's these sort of jetpack scooters, right? When you're on the like water sports thing where you have a sort of jetpack, but then
that's a new thing.
It gushes out water a lot. I'm not sure how it works, but it looks really cool and fun.
There's a huge jet of water that's propelling you upwards, and it looks really fun. Yeah. But I don't think hoverboards are too far away. I don't think they're far away from like public ownership. That's mine. I think only the rich and like contained into a confined space, these things will be like more readily practiced. But to give it to the common man is not for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah. I hope I still live when they invent cool stuff like that.
I mean, we're lucky enough to live through the internet, so I feel like we got our thing.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, we can dream, you know.
What a beautiful ending.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 3 of the Your Rivers Are Wrong podcast. If you want to listen to more things like this, whatever topics might catch your fancy, feel free to send it to us. We have an email, yourriversarewrong@gmail.com, where you can send in any prompts you'd like, and we'll probably bring it up, honestly. This was a really fun episode. Looking forward to the next one.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in today. We're so glad to have you here. And as always, remember, your rivers are probably wrong.
They're probably wrong. Yeah.
Probably wrong.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes that you'd like to hear us cover, feel free to contact us at yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is written by Maarten Schellekens. Thanks for that. And again, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you at the next one.